There is objection. Question number 1 in the name of Metiria Turei.
Tēnā koe, Mr Speaker. Tēnā koutou i te whare.
Order.
My question is to the Minister for Economic Development and asks, does he agree with the Department of Internal Affairs advice to his officials on the proposed International Convention Centre that, quote, virtually any of these proposed concessions would almost certainly be followed by an increase in the number of people seeking help, citing problems linked with casino machines or casino table games, end quote, and if not, why not?
The Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr Speaker, no, not necessarily, for 3 reasons. The first point is that the paper the member is referring to considers a theoretical increase in pokie machines of 850. The eventual agreement between Sky City and the Crown provides for only 230. The second important point is that the paper's advice is from 2011, so of course it's not aware of the significant harm reduction measures negotiated in the agreement. And the third point is that the number of pokie machines in New Zealand is currently falling and is continuing to fall by around 500 per year. This deal would only slow that reduction by around 6 months.
Supplementary question.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
Did the Minister read the warnings from the Department of Internal Affairs Manager of Gambling Policy, Mr John Markland, that thousands of children would, quote, almost certainly, end quote, be harmed from the increased gambling caused by this deal, including being inadequately clothed and fed, and suffering other examples of deprivation and poor parenting, and why did he then pursue the deal?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Well, Mr Speaker, I don't recall that specific advice, but I have read a range of advice with various propositions along those lines. And again, I'd make the point to the member that there's 2 or 3 things that mitigate against that. Firstly, there's by no means clear at all that a marginal increase in machines in one casino would increase gambling harm overall, especially when the total number of machines across the country and across Auckland continues to decline. Secondly, the negotiated significant additional harm minimisation measures that apply to all gambling machines in that casino will together act to reduce harm. And thirdly, once the concessions are in place, there is absolutely nothing to stop the regulatory authorities introducing new harm minimisation measures over time.
Supplementary question.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
Has the Minister read his own regulatory impact statement containing evidence that gamblers don't keep to their own limits when using voluntary pre-commitment cards? In short, a voluntary pre-commitment card is something like a voluntary seatbelt. And also, is he not making a nonsense of the sinking lid policy by guaranteeing that Auckland will have at least 2,000 pokie machines for the next 35 years, despite the hard work of community groups like the Otara Action Group to reduce the number of pokies in Auckland City?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Well, Mr Speaker, to answer the last question first, the reality is that the number of machines is continuing to decline, and of course we're only talking about a marginal increase in the number of machines at that casino. The member also singles out one harm minimisation measure. Yes, I have read the regulatory impact statement, which makes it quite clear that it is difficult to actually determine whether there will be additional risk caused by these additional machines or not. It says it is difficult to quantify the potential size of any increased risk of harm, and notes that most gambling does not cause harm either to the gambler or to others.
Point of order, sir.
Point of order, Metiria Turei.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I seek leave to table a document compiled by my office of information from Auckland City Council showing that there has been a reduction of 1,189 pokie machines since 2004, soon to be increased as a result of this deal by 470 automated machines.
Leave is sought to table that document. Is there any objection to that being done? There appears to be none. The document can be tabled.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr Speaker. Did the Minister and John Key consider financing an international convention centre in a way that would not pose the risk of harm to thousands of children, and if not, why not?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Well, Mr Speaker, the Cabinet actually did discuss, of course, the various matters around this arrangement before it actually made its decision. I suppose in much the same way that the Green Party might have done back in 2001 when deciding not to publicly oppose a similar arrangement which took place under the previous Labor government in 2001 and 2002, and they didn't call that a dirty deal.
Supplementary.
Order. Supplementary question. Metiria Turei.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. How did...
Order.
Point of order, Mr Speaker. It is difficult to hear with the shouting over his side.
Order. Order. Supplementary question. Metiria Turei.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. How did the Minister weigh up the increased risk of problem gambling-related suicide when deciding to pursue this deal?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Well, Mr Speaker, I think it's quite clear in the papers that Cabinet assessed all those risks, as I say, in much the same way as previous governments would have when they endorsed and encouraged a much smaller convention centre to be built in 2003 with a very similar number of gambling machines.
Supplementary question. Metiria Turei.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Given the warnings about the harm it poses, the obvious moral element in this legislation referring to gambling...
Order. The member can start that question again.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Given the warnings about the harm it poses, the obvious moral elements in this legislation as it refers to gambling law, and the comments of David McGee that non-party voting is designed for issues like gambling, will he support a personal vote on this legislation to allow MPs to vote with their conscience?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr Speaker, no, this is a government measure, and it is my belief that parties in favour of investments and jobs and growth for New Zealanders will vote in favour of this bill. Parties that are against those things will vote against it, just like they voted against RMA changes, against the Crown Minerals changes, against the EEZ legislation and against the ultra-fast broadband legislation.
Supplementary question. Metiria Turei.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Will the Minister now assure the House that no child will suffer ill treatment as a result of the regulatory concessions in this deal, and that no adult will harm themselves as a result of the increased gambling opportunities it creates?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr Speaker, no minister can give that assurance in the same way they can't in regard to any other human activity that potentially causes social harm if the harm is not minimised properly, and this government is seeking to do that. Now, if the Greens had a strong principle on this, why aren't they just worried about these 230 machines? Why aren't they calling immediately for all gambling to be closed down and the 3,500 people at Sky City to no longer have a job?
Point of order. Point of order.
Point of order. Metiria Turei.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I seek leave to table advice received by me under the Official Information Act from MED from April 2013, showing that there are some saying that there's some 71,500 people who are negatively affected by casino gambling, of which half are children.
Leave is sought to table that. Is there any objection? There is none. It can be tabled. Question number 2, Jamie Lee Ross.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Finance and asks, what